Hello! In this lesson, we are going to learn about commonplace books, which are going to be a very important tool for your in-Hale work this year. In this video, we will learn about what is a commonplace book, how do you set one up, and how do you keep one. So what is that? What is a commonplace book? It is a book to collect wisdom through quotes from things you read, listen to, or view, and from people around you. It's a place where you can go to reflect on good ideas that you come across. It's a spot to ponder big questions, and it's a book to make your thinking visible. We're going to watch part of this video to learn a little bit more about what is a commonplace book, because I didn't invent this concept. It's a very old idea. So here you go. Let's watch this next little bit of this video.
So at its simplest, a commonplace book is just a journal where instead of collecting your own thoughts, you collect the thoughts of others. And primarily, you collect those thoughts from what you read. This is a commonplace book that I recently started because I filled my last one up. And you'll notice that here I'm going for almost no structure at all. This time I decided I would just write down quotes that I liked from the things I read, and occasionally I would try to summarize some of the thoughts that I was having as I reviewed them. So in this book, actually, I have 3 quotes written down on the first page. I have a quote from my favorite living writer, Wendell Berry, and it's from a poem called Healing. Berry writes that despair is the too little of responsibility and pride is the too much. That line just really stuck out to me, so I put it in my book. And then I was rereading my favorite science fiction novel, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I ran into this quote from Odo, who's a very important character in that book, even though she never shows up on the page. And the line is, "The saint is never busy." And then I was reviewing an older book that I had read on Augustine by Rowan Williams, and he wrote, "Talking about evil is not talking about things." And I was reviewing that book for my newsletter when I was talking actually about Stoic metaphysics and Marcus Aurelius. By the way, there's a link to that newsletter down below. And then you can see I wrote a little bit about what these things had in common. I was not collecting these quotes as if they were going to be connected. What I found was just the things that were sticking out to me lately all had a kind of theme. So I wrote some thoughts. What do these quotes have in common? Well, they seem to suggest that the best way to live, of being in the world, is not just a matter of avoiding bad things. The saint is a man who is never busy because he has aligned his will and his way of living so that he always enjoys what he does. And if you can do that, perhaps you can achieve the balance that Barry is talking about, the balance between despair and pride. Just a thought I had, but it came to me because I was reviewing what I read and I wrote it down. But how can you do that, and how can you get started? So with commonplace books, there's really just 3 steps. First, you need to read. Or you need to watch or listen, so you can be watching movies, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks. Commonplace books begin with observation. This can also mean conversations, I would add, but a lot of it is going to come from the things that you read or the media that you consume. The second step is to capture, and by that I just mean write it down. When you look at the page of my commonplace book, you can see at the beginning, it's clearly there. There are just 3 quotes, and I always attribute the source. Now, I like to do this thing where I actually write in small print letters, and that clearly distinguishes the captured thoughts from my own synthesis that comes later. And that's step 3, reflect. Every once in a while, I just write my own thoughts in my commonplace book. These are always about the text that I have been reading or consuming, and it's usually an attempt to synthesize some of the stuff that I'm putting together. This can actually sometimes just be 1 quote. Sometimes it can be 3 quotes, like in this example. Other times it can be 10 quotes. There is no rule here. The point just is to use the things that you are reading or consuming and turn them into activities of the mind rather than just stuff that you can consume and then discard. The idea of wanting to keep a commonplace book is actually really, really old. You could maybe trace some of the ideas back to Aristotle. Seneca certainly had the idea of a commonplace book. John Locke, the British philosopher, actually published a book on how to organize your commonplace book, which is another topic which we could address, but I'm gonna leave out here. You should organize it however you think is best. I've never.
So, as you heard in that video, the idea of a commonplace book is very old, maybe as old as Aristotle in ancient Greece. And the idea of a commonplace book is it's a place for you to keep great ideas. So why are we doing this? Text interpretation is all about making sense of other people's ideas. And that's what the inhale part of Room to Breathe is all about, is making sense of what other people say and think. And your Commonplace book will be a primary way that you'll make your thinking visible during your Room to Breathe inhales this year. Your Commonplace book is a place to collect wisdom, good ideas, beautiful words, and especially your ideas as you read, listen, and view this year. In your Commonplace book, you are collecting ideas about life and the universe. You're creating a lens through which you view the world. You're defining your overall perspective from which you interpret the world, and you're illuminating your worldview. We're going to create your Commonplace book today. To do this, you need to choose a notebook. You can use one that you've already been using in language arts this year, or you can start a new one. You can use a basic school notebook, or you can use a special notebook you bring from home. You need to decide how to organize your Commonplace book. In a moment, I'll show you how to do this. And then the third step is to make it yours. Decorating your notebook's cover, personalizing it to be a special and inspiring book for you this year. I want you to think that this is an awesome spot for you to keep your ideas. So it's got to feel awesome to you. In the mastery task after you view this video, you're going to have a chance to personalize your Commonplace book. You will add a quote and your thoughts about your quote as your first entry in your Commonplace book. But first, what's a quote? I'm going to show you using my own Commonplace book right now. All right, I'm going to show you my Commonplace book. So I'm using just a little notebook. Like I said, you can use whatever kind of notebook you want. It can be a regular scribbler or a school notebook, or it can be a special notebook like this. After this video, I'm going to decorate my cover, but I'm going to skip that for now so that you can see how I set it up. The first thing that I wanted to show you in my notebook is the table of contents. My first page, my first few pages in my notebook are going to be for my table of contents. And this is because I want a way to organize my ideas. I want to be able to look at my table of contents and then see what find different things within my Commonplace book later. So I've set aside the first, second, third, and fourth page for my table of contents. And then the next thing that I did is I numbered my pages. So I went through, I just did mine in the bottom corners. It's up to you where you want to put these. I did page 1, 2, 3, and I went all the way through my whole notebook and labeled the page numbers. Again, you can put those page numbers wherever you want. Something that I added to the back of my notebook, which you could do if you want to, though this step is optional, is to create an index. Some of you may know of indexes from nonfiction books, and what they are is they're topic organizers. So one way to organize, if I wanted to kind of look back in my Commonplace book for different ideas based on topic or subject, that would be a way that I could do that. And I'll show you how that works in just a second as I put my first entry in. So I took the last 4 pages of my notebook, labeled them with the letters of the alphabet, and set those aside for my index. Again, this is optional. You can do this if you want to. One thing I for sure want you to do, though, is to set aside a couple pages in your notebook, either at the front or the back, for a TBR list. And this means to be read. And this is a place where you can keep track of books, or doesn't have to be reading through print, right? Could be things to listen to or view that you're going to make a list of here so that you can look back later when you're looking for some good things to read, or when you need an idea of something. So what I'm going to show you now is how to put your first quote in here. So this is the mastery task for this lesson. And I'm going to turn back to my very first page where I'm going to put my first quote in, okay? So I wanted to show you how to record a quote because it's not something that everyone knows how to do. What does a quote mean? A quote is when you have someone else's ideas and you record them and give credit to them. So the mastery task in this round is going to ask you to choose a quote from someone who has a good idea that you think is worth capturing. And so the quote that I'm going to record in my Commonplace book is by one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver. To start my quote, on page 1, I'm going to use quotation marks. Quotation marks look like this. Then I'm going to write the quote. Mary Oliver said, "Instructions for living a life." Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. I'm going to end my quote the same way I began, with quotation marks. So you can see that my quote is starting and ending with quotation marks. Then I'm going to credit the author, Mary Oliver. The rest of the mastery task will ask you to interpret the quote that you find. And there are must do, should do, and aspire to do options for how you do that. I wanted to show you, though, now that I have a quote in here, what I'm going to do in my table of contents and in my index. So flipping back to my table of contents, I now have a quote from Mary Oliver in my book. So I'm going to put Mary Oliver quote, page 1. Flipping back to my index, if you choose to use an index, this is a way to keep track of topics. So the topic, I think, of Mary Oliver's quote, "Instructions for living a life, pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it." I think this is about the meaning of life, so I'm going to put this here under M. I'm going to write the topic, which is meaning of life. Page 1. So I'm going to put the page numbers anywhere in my book where I can find information about the meaning of life. I'm going to put the page number beside that. And that is how you're going to do your first entry in your Commonplace book of a piece of wisdom that you want to keep forever.